Hey everybody, it's me. It's your old buddy Steve Simonson, and here I am once more to talk to the awesomers out there. Now, what does that mean? That means we're doing an awesomers podcast episode right now, and the way you know that is you're listening. That's what's happening. All right, now that we got that update out of the way, I want to give a little bit of time today to something that is frustrating old Steve. Now, sometimes when I'm out and about, I get the chance to, have some idle time, and I'll scroll around on the Facebooks. Pretty sure that's how they refer to it, the Facebooks. And I see posts in various groups or various places that just, well, they drive me up a wall, everybody. And sometimes the posts themselves are not egregious or problematic, although they may just reflect somebody's inexperience or asking questions and looking for solutions. So I'm not, there's no such thing as a dumb question, right? I like to say I know nothing about nothing, and that's a good place to begin. It's like, let's come from a place of humility. But when I see questions, it's like, gosh, let's make sure that you address the question in the correct way. So today we're going to deep dive, or maybe shallow dive, on this topic of how to get high quality products from China. So I read a post, and essentially it says, hey, one thing I noticed from China is they can produce high quality products, but they have a flaw, and it's called quality control. And their idea, because they're a relatively new seller, is, what if I got somebody to check all the units before they shipped them? And this would save me, refunds, about a ton in refunds, right? Because when you have unhappy customers, you get bad reviews, you get refunds. Like, financially, that's a terrible outcome. And so they're asking kind of a logical question, which is, how do I find somebody who will do this? Now, the flaw starts right after that, where they're essentially saying, I don't want an inspection company. I want somebody that checks every individual piece. There's no reason to send an inspection company in just to check a batch of samples, because they might miss something. And this is where the flaw is in that concept. So when you're just starting out, I understand you want somebody to look at every unit. And if you do, that's fine. Get ready to, buckle up to get ready to pay. It's not necessary, however. This is the most important part. Inspection reports on what has already happened. But if you have a problem, which can be picked up either with 100% inspection, which can be done through inspection companies, or through some normal process where, they randomly take, let's say, if it's a first shipment, you might do 15 or 20% of those things. You randomly take them from the production. So let's just say you have 10 pallets. You might pull a carton off of each of those pallets and, dig into those and inspect those just randomly. The inspection company shouldn't tell the factory, oh, well, bring us what you want us to inspect. And they also shouldn't announce the day they're inspecting. The inspector shows up and there's some randomness to that sample selection. So that's the first thing, is, do you have a good inspection process? If you find a problem, your objective should be to understand what caused that problem, and then get the production process to squash the problem. If you start thinking in terms of real volume, the idea of having, a third party, whether it's your own person, you being your own third party inspection, or an outside third party company that's doing that, this is something that's not necessary. Again, inspections reporting on what's already happened. Production engineering is how you avoid the problem to begin with. Now, one of the things that is, I'll use the word interesting, and then you can decide later what word I actually meant about interesting. One of the things that drives me insane is all of the people who jump on there that are clearly inspection companies or shills or, other things. They're like, a professional inspector will cooperate, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, yes, fine. I know you're trying to get business. That's fine. But that's not actually answering the guy's question. Now, I did see a very good response from a trusted resource, and he talks about, hey, listen, why don't you get good quality assurance processes instead of crappy quality inspection processes. Quality assurance is where you're building that engineering on the front end. Remember, every defect that you find, there's a cause to it, right? So if you got a return, you want to find out, well, golly, why'd you return this? And depending on the type of item, let's say it's a stuffed animal, they're like, hey, well, the eyes fell off, after 2 days. And instead of going, well, we should inspect the stuffed animal to make sure the eyes are still on it or make sure they feel good. It's like, no, let's get a specification written. Let's get the eye fastened into the stuffed animal in a way that is not going to allow it to fall. And by the way, there's in that particular case, there's child safety and all kinds of laws that you have to adhere to. So there are probably compliance metrics and processes that you have to file just to get it to be sellable in the United States. But even when you don't have some sort of compliance entity pushing you, then you should find the types of quality assurance process that will make the inspection more routine instead of finding a bunch of problems. So what is a way to prevent problems? Well, first of all, again, I've already kind of hinted at this, but diagnosing the core issue or issues. Sometimes it's not just a one thing. Let's use that stuffed animal again. Let's say the eyes are staying on, but there's a hole is popping up between the tail and the butt of the dog, right? We've got a little dog stuffed animal, and now stuffing is coming out at that spot. Well, that's they didn't sew it right, or maybe when they cut too wide and there's a gap in it. And all of these things are solvable, eminently solvable. And that's really an important thing. Now, inspection is part of the process. And by the way, can inspectors show up and not do their job or, get bribed to look the other way? Yes, but how many times will you use the inspection company if they keep failing you, right? So I don't consider that to be the core issue. I would just focus on process engineering. And I think there's, some of the answers that I saw for this were pretty good, but some of the answers I saw were terrible. Somebody mentions, oh, well, just use Six Sigma, quality control, and then you'll be fine. And it's like, that's not going to work in China. You've got to approach it from the Chinese process management and be thoughtful about it. Now, those of us, who are dealing with reality, we cannot travel to China right now. Certainly not without massive quarantine and testing and, wastes of time, and then the risk of being locked down at any point, which means you really do have to rely on third parties. If you don't have people on the ground, then you really do need third parties to help you. And my advice is, if you really have this immediate problem, start diagnosing the problem, get into the details. And I mean, like, what is the cause of this? I would do a video conference with the factory and go, look, I got this return. You see this problem they're complaining about? What do you think that's caused by? Now, if you're not an expert in manufacturing yet, that's okay, but just use your spidey sense and go, I think that reason they gave me is a load of garbage. It probably is right? The law of parsimony, also known as Occam's razor, the simplest solution is usually the right solution. So when you see a gap in your little stuffed animal, like there's no cloth covering that, you need more material, right? Or the fastening process needs to be done in a better way. If they're sewing it, maybe they need thicker thread or more thread or a longer seam. There's logic that applies to any of these problems. And I really want you guys to apply your own common sense to it. There's no reason why that is not a good guide for you. And be skeptical of factories shining you on with simple answers like, oh, that was a one-time thing. We had one person and we got rid of them. It'll never happen again. Or, as is the case, I mentioned this in a podcast the other day, when we have problems even after our quality assurance and quality inspection process, you do enough volume, you will have problems. You will have things that are off spec. Now, that doesn't mean they're all showstoppers, right? Some things are off spec, and it's like, you know what? The gloss level is 2% high on this, and we can tell the factory, dial it back, make sure you're within spec on the next shipment, and that's a yellow light situation, not a red light. But assuming that you're, working with the factory and doing everything, and something still falls through, get on the phone with them and figure it out, and then use that, spidey sense to determine if what they're telling you is right or wrong. When we report a problem, they will routinely tell us, well, we've never had a problem before in all of our history. You have had the first complaint or defect ever, kind of implying that it's you somehow that's creating the defective product. First of all, that's a load of crap. That's, many of these factories I deal with have been in business for, decades, and I'm not the only guy who's had a problem. Secondly, I think when you are vigilant, you send a signal to the factory early that's like, hey, just so you know, when you're a new factory, we did a factory audit because we want to know your capabilities. And we put you through a factory, selection process that I described in an earlier podcast about the sourcing process. That gives the supplier a sense of, oh, this is a person who's vigilant. This is somebody who's on the lookout for potential trouble. And, if you go Google the broken window philosophy, this is a result of, or the potential is that a supplier goes, because they're so diligent and because they're so, on top of this quality, instead of me taking a shortcut like I might like to, I'm not going to do it because I know this particular company or this particular person is on the lookout for trouble. And that the equivalency in the broken window philosophy is if you have a bunch of cops on the street, you're less likely to have crime. And you're the cop, right? Your inspectors are cops. Your insistence on quality and your rigorous adherence to a quality manufacturing processes will ensure that they are less likely to cut corners. As always, I recommend that you read the book Poorly Made in China if you haven't already, and learn from some of the lessons that world-class experts have been burned by, myself included. My stories are not in there, but boy, I sure identify with just about every story in there. Now, this doesn't mean you can't have stuff made well in China. It just means that you should be cautious about it. In fact, I'll give you a great final example. So after a bunch of these responses, and they're frustrating me along the way, some of them are reasonable and some are unreasonable. Then I got one at the end of this thread that was wildly annoying to me. And the person says, hey, listen, yes, well said, they do lack quality control. But, I, as a seller, I've found some good products here, and I found some good factories, and I just trust them. I don't even send an inspection company. And that is like a recipe for disaster. That for you to think that they're looking out for you, or somehow you're immune because of some special relationship you have to problems, is, well, it's naive is the nicest way I could put it. I have told the story before, and I'll just briefly touch on it. We used a factory for over 10 years. We were their largest customer, right? In the world, we're their largest customer. We did, it ramped up over the course of that 10 years. But, by the end, we were doing $3-4 million a year with them. And over that time, we had done 10 or 20 million. I don't know the exact total during that time, but substantial numbers. And we liked each other, right? The factory owner, I liked the guy. He's a good guy. Well, a fun guy to hang out with, but not so good when it came to ethics. They pulled a fast one that my rigorous inspection, our quality assurance, we didn't catch until after the fact. And it turned into a giant, dozens of container, multi-million-dollar problem. So, am I perfect? Certainly not. I would never portray myself as such. But even with, rigorous experience and great on the ground people and, experts, we can all get burned. So the idea that I just trust somebody and I've never had a problem so far, so, I don't even send inspectors, is, well, it's just idiotic, honestly. Please Don't make that mistake. It is not going to work. And I certainly would avoid taking on that kind of uninformed opinion. So to summarize, everybody, inspection still necessary. You may do some pre-inspection. You may do some raw materials inspections. Sometimes we do that. There are lots of different types of inspections. The most common that an Amazon seller uses is what we call a pre-shipment inspection, which again just tells you what's already happened. And it should pick up the problems. And if it doesn't, you should fire that inspection company and get a new one. By the way, when you're checking a batch, if you're an inspection company and it's the first shipment and you're like, I'm going to check 15% of these, I'm randomly pulling it. If you find anything out of spec in that, then you have to pull another 15%. And if you find something out of spec, you pull another 15%. And at a certain point, you go, based on this 45% or 60% that I've tested, you've got an 8% defect rate. What do you want to do about it? And then you negotiate with the factory before shipping. In some cases, we have the factory fix it or pull those and reduce the shipment. There's lots of ways to solve these things. But anybody who believes that they're somehow immune because they've found this super special supplier, you're just living in a little made-up dream world. And I encourage you to enjoy it while you can. But at some point, reality will come and visit you, as it does all of us who have been around for any length of time. So anyway, that's my little rant of the day. I want you guys to be judicious about it. If you go to the Empowery Partner Directory, there are inspection companies there, both in the affiliate and strategic partner area. I certainly recommend using those because you can get cash back on them. And I implore you to be serious about your quality, right? There's nothing that kills a brand faster than having a rash of 1-star reviews and legitimate quality problems, right? It creates a whole new relaunch phase. It creates a whole new expense that you may not have anticipated. And these are expenses you don't want and are wildly preventable, right? You can prevent all of this. So let's get serious. Let's get it done right, everybody. Thanks. And we'll see you soon, awesomers. Bye-bye.